Hello, good morning, everyone. And well, it's good morning in South Africa, and welcome to all our friends and friendly faces from all across the world. Today's topic, the identity of God, was chosen with great care and love because we wanted to explore what is the arguably the most famous personality in all of time, God himself or herself. A very warm welcome, Sister Denise.
Thank you so much. It's wonderful to be here again.
Today, we are going to look at the identity of God. As you know, this is a two-part session. And so, Sister Denise, before we start, I was browsing through YouTube the other day. The topic of the discussion was, why are there so many engineers who become CEOs? And to that end, it was stated that the current head of Microsoft, Satya Nadella, when he took over Microsoft, he sent an email to all employees saying the following: our industry does not respect tradition, it only respects innovation. And I couldn't help but wondering, does the same apply to other aspects of life, like spirituality, like the way you lead your life, like your current profession? We all have grown up amongst traditionalists. We ourselves may be a traditionalist. God traditionally has been held dear. Somebody who's called conservative is also by definition religious. What I'd like to discuss today is how is God relevant in the year 2022?
Okay, well, I'd like to answer this by taking up the larger aspect of your introduction about tradition and innovation and what people believe about God and the reality of God are really very different. And I think pretty much everyone in this session today is a Raj Yogi, a practitioner of Raj Yoga meditation, and a student of Gyan. And Gyan, as we all know, was given to us directly by the incorporeal Supreme Soul, who says, I am God, and I am speaking to you, and I'm giving you the ancient knowledge once again. So what happens to people's thinking is that there is an assumption that the knowledge, the ancient knowledge, is the true knowledge, and whatever is new is actually inferior in quality to whatever is ancient. And so there are basically two situations, and these are to do with preconceptions and assumptions of people. So there are one set of people which you mentioned as the traditionalists, the conservatives, the religious people, and they have an absolutely fixed idea, which is an article of faith in almost all the religions, but especially in India, which is the most ancient, which says that truth is handed down from the ancestors, and it cannot be arrived at by inquiry or experimentation. And then on the other hand, we are in the scientific age. You mentioned about engineers and innovation. And in the scientific age, we look at everything in terms of the scientific method, and we know that you arrive at information by observation and inquiry and experimentation. So these two views, both of them are totally opposite of each other. Now, when incorporeal Shiv Baba speaks to us, he says both of those are faulty, because he says the ancestors come from the earliest time, and the earliest time in the time cycle comes after the end of the previous cycle, which means that whatever information was given by God was at the end of the previous cycle and is not available to the ancestors, so they don't know. And when they reach the Copper Age, and it is the time of what we call the small destruction, then they remember something, but they don't remember everything. And so whatever is this partial information that they remember and pass down, that is not truth. That is something of which some of it is relatively true, but it's not the total truth. And then the other aspect that God tells us about scientific inquiry is that scientific inquiry can only tell you about matter, and it cannot tell you about spirit. And therefore, it's also a partial, it gives you only partial information about what is real and what is true. So both of these are inadequate to provide us with truth. And this is the reason why he says, okay, I have to actually come at a time when everything reaches an extreme point, and which is also the time for the reset of the whole world. And then I give you the truth, and that is the present time. So in that sense, God is absolutely current and has been speaking to us from shortly before the Second World War. And the information has been emerging very slowly, but now all of the information that we need in order to do our part in this process is available. There may be still more information, but we will see. And so what we have to do is really understand that new information is given in these two contexts, both of which are inadequate. One is the context of science, and the other is the context of tradition. And the way that God proves himself is in these two contexts, because he's an educator as well as an innovator. And what he has to do is to get people to think independently of their preconceptions. And that's a very, very difficult piece of work. But since God knows what he's doing, then he must be doing it in the right way, in the way that works. And so here are all of us studying this material, and all of us individually are limited either by our adherence to tradition or by our adherence to the scientific method, and both of which prevent us from understanding and studying enough or well enough. And yet this is the given, this is the data. Here we are, we have our limitations, and his teaching style is to gradually pull us out of these limitations so that we can get absolute clarity, and that takes time.
Although many of the individuals listening to you right now have delved into spirituality, God does tend to remain somewhat of an enigma, does he not?
Well, absolutely, you see, because the religions have portrayed God as an elderly man with a big beard, and who is a punitive figure, and who lives in heaven, and who likes traditional people, and which is a very limited view, as well as an incorrect view. And so he says, I am not a man, I am bodiless, and I am a soul, I am the supreme soul, I am the father of all the souls, and I have an inheritance to give you, which is the knowledge, the truth about the creator and the creation. If you're interested, sit down and I will start teaching you. So the process of us sitting down learning this is a very long process, because as he continues to speak, he is slowly wiping away our dedication, loyalty, and investment, and blind belief in our preconceptions. And so that is a slow process of grinding it away. And it also involves periods that are a bit more explosive, where the soul is sort of pulled into a kind of catastrophic situation that it then has to come out of, at which point a lot of this material that prevents us from seeing clearly is wiped off. So it's sometimes quite catastrophic, and sometimes it's a slow process, and it varies from individual to individual. And all of it is quite intangible and quite difficult for most people to figure out. And this is why they say always God works in mysterious ways, but it doesn't mean that it has to be incomprehensible. Our comprehension is our problem, not his problem. And he does interact with us in such a way that slowly we get it. And then we move away from where we were. And there's no way around it. It takes time.
The focus in spirituality is a relationship with God, isn't it? So this is the desire of a lot of people who embrace spirituality, the real spirituality, not the other types. They want a relationship with God. On the other hand, this is one of the most difficult things to do, because God appears to be elusive. How does one, Sister Denise, embrace, open the channels of communication between oneself as a very flawed human being and God himself? How does one do that?
Well, it is possible, but you see, one has to understand properly what he's saying. First of all, the definition of the word relationship is not a warm, fuzzy feeling. That's a human definition. But when he says, have relationship with me, and he says also, the main relationships that I have with you, I am your father, your teacher, and your Satguru. And I'm your friend, and I'm your mother. And these are the 5 main relationships. And from his angle, relationship means influence. And also relationship means that there is something to be gained from God by positioning yourself in that particular relationship with him. So, for example, if he is your father, then you are his son. That means whether you're a woman or a man, you are his son. And his son means that you have rights and you have to claim them. And also you're the inheritor. So you also need to be fit to manage the fortune that is being bequeathed to you. So that is the relationship of father. And the relationship of mother is that you are given birth by the father through the mother, and so you have a relationship with the mother, and the mother will show you the details of how to be in the relationship with the father, the teacher, and the Satguru. And so in practical terms, the mother form is Brahma Baba, who is a man, but he is the instrument through whom incorporeal God talks to us in physical words in the material world. And so Brahma Baba is an interface between the material and the spiritual. And at the moment, he is in the subtle regions, which means that we are working with in the physical dimension, the subtle dimension, and the incorporeal dimension to the extent that we have understood what has been told to us about it. Now then, God as the teacher means he knows what he's talking about, and he's talking to us about the creator and the creation, and he is weaning us away from incorrect ideas. So the teacher means he teaches us ideas which are true, and he is teaching us how to use the intellect and how to use the mind to be able to process ideas that are coherent and consistent, and to show us exactly where and how the traditional beliefs of religion are flawed, and also how the knowledge of science is flawed insofar as it doesn't really deal with anything to do with the spirit, the soul, the supreme soul, perpetual motion, and the interface between matter and spirit. And so he teaches us about this. And as the teacher, he says, if you're my student, then you have to pay attention and listen to what I say, because I am the truth, and I'm telling you material that is very, very different from what you're used to. And so you need to study it deeply. And I'm also teaching you how to use your intellect in a different manner from the way people of the world use their intellect, whether it's a scientific use of the intellect or a literary or a philosophical use of the intellect. So that's the relationship with the teacher. And the relationship with the Satguru is to do with the process of purification and preparation for death, and enabling the soul to become completely free and completely pure. And when we engage in this relationship, then we are accountable. So the Satguru will also hold us accountable. And that means also that our relationship with God has to do with to what extent are we connected, and to what extent do we block the connection through one thing or another. And the main thing that he teaches us also is the law of karma, the philosophy of karma. So we have karma with other human beings, we have karma with nature, and we also have karma with God. And what he's saying is that everything that you do, which is incorrect karma, blocks you from access to God. And so you have to watch your karma very, very carefully. And that includes your mind, because your thoughts, your words, and your actions are all karma, and you're accountable for all of them. And you have to know that God has a full record of all of it. And so you have to be honest, you have to be clear, you have to be straight, because otherwise it blocks your communication, your access to God. So this is a meaning of relationship. God is your friend because he is enabling you to have access to him without being scared to death and overwhelmed and all of that. Because for, as you say, a flawed human being, as we all are, to come face to face with the unveiled truth, that is really very scary, because it makes the individual very conscious of their, in a sense, inadequacy, their corrupt condition, their debased state, their emptiness, their stupidity, all of this. So for an individual to feel all this, being in front of the unveiled truth, requires tremendous amount of courage. And so he veils that stark truth by his loving form. And in the ancient scriptures, this is mentioned. And yet the intrepid seeker after truth wants to see the full glory of God, the full unveiled being, and experience the full power and the full light. But you have to be up for it. And not very many people are, because you have to be really clean and really real when you're in front of the truth. So all of these things, they're there. And so when a person comes into spirituality, I think most people, they don't think it's quite this serious. And if they want to maintain their spiritual progress, then they need to come to terms with the fact that this is a really big thing to do. And another aspect, which is, I think, very interesting, which came in the Murlis of the last few days, he says, I am here specifically to meet with those souls who used to be the highest of all humans, which is called the deity souls, who have fallen and become just ordinary people, like and completely unable to recognize themselves. But he says, I know who you are, and I invite you to come and become what you were originally. And this is my interaction with you. This is the intensity of my relationship with you and your relationship with me. But the vast majority of people do not desire this kind of intense engagement with God. They want something a little easier. They want to be free. They want to go home. They want out from the world of hell. So it's very much to do with, do you know who you are? Ask yourself, do you know who you are? And ask yourself, okay, what do you really, really want? Because what you want is going to let you know who you are. These are connected.
In the world that we live in, there's a lot of emphasis on becoming a self-made person, right? There's emphasis on education, on ambition, on creating a good life for yourself. And like you just said, for many, God is not high on their list of priorities. But what I wanted to ask you is, do we need God?
It's an interesting question. And there's a spiritual law that I've been looking at recently, and that is that at the time when everything is just completely collapsed, and you have no recourse, and there is chaos, and everything that could possibly go wrong is going wrong, your mind automatically goes to God, and that's a spiritual law. So in a sense, you need God, because God will give you back what you have lost, and you will not really be aware of what you have lost until you've lost it all. And then you turn automatically to the source. So we need God like we need food and water and air to live on this earth. We need God. The soul needs God, because the energy of the human soul is now totally depleted and corrupted, and you need God to restore it to its original condition, because this is a reset going on, and the soul has to be reset, and it can't be reset in any other way than this full contact with God, through which the full power of God is filled into the soul, and the soul is then restored and reset. And this is the time that we're in right now. So it's a very incredible time.
How do you successfully engage with God? Okay, I think one of the hallmarks about God's character is that he doesn't speak. He doesn't. I'm speaking about one's direct relationship with him. Okay, he doesn't talk, and he does not have a physical body, and so he is a being out there, and you are here in your physical body, and you want to have a successful relationship with him, right? How do you go about doing that in a way that's real for you? And I think this is one of the aspects that a lot of people find off-putting about spirituality, in that because from our perspective, you have to engage with God with your mind. How do you know it's real or not? How do you know it's not just your imagination? How do you know that God is responding to your quest for him? What is your yardstick to measure that your relationship with God is successful?
Yeah. I think I would query your statement, God doesn't talk. God doesn't talk like with sound like we use, but your relationship with God has to be telepathic. And that is a communication at the level of the mind. And how you engage with God is you need to begin to communicate with an invisible being. And the first question you need to ask yourself is, do you believe in God? You know, that's the first basic question. And there are a lot of people who do and a lot of people who don't. But among those who do, they do not know God. And among those who don't, they also do not know God. But still, if you believe in God, that's the sign that you are interested and open. And then there's another aspect, and that is that there are people who are seekers of truth. And God is generally considered as truth. It is said, God knows what we don't know. So the first most important thing from God's side is he says, okay, I'm you who have become my students have become such because you recognize me. And so you recognize God to a percentage, because, as you say, God is very subtle and very deep, imperceptible to the physical senses, but one of the things that is said about God is he's the giver of the third eye. So the third eye is the eye of the mind. And the mind which is able to perceive God means a being whose capacity for perception is such that they could see that what is being said to them comes from God. It cannot come from any other source. And then that takes them to that source. Because you know a person by what they say and by what they do, not by just looking at their face. That won't tell you that much. It will tell you something, but you actually know a person by interacting with them. So the first step of interaction is to put out, to reach out and convey to God in your way that I am here. Are you there? So it's, and this is the meaning of yoga. It's a communication between two. And of course, with communications technology, we know about Bluetooth and internet and all the different ways that you can have connectivity electronically. And this is a very good image and symbol for how you communicate with God, because you're using energy, and communications technology uses a different kind of energy, physical energy, but you're using the energy of the mind, the energy of thought. And the more you engage with what God is telling you, which is what we know as the Murlis, and he is telling us about himself and about the creation through the medium of Prajapita Brahma, who is also giving his interpretation of what Shiv Baba is saying. And so we have to study this, because this information leads you to God. And this is why in our study and practice, it is said first Gyan, then yoga, then dharana. And so Gyan means you have to take the ideas that are given to you, like what you are. First, you have an introduction to yourself. And, he will say, look, you are eternal, immortal souls. And it's there in the scriptures that the soul is eternal and immortal, but the rest of the details are incorrect. And it never actually says that you are a soul. It's more like you have a soul. And so he's changing that and saying it's not that you have a soul, you are a soul. You are immortal, you are imperishable, and you have become completely corrupt and totally weighed down by negative karma, which other people call sin, but he calls weight or pressure. So you are kind of forced into materialism, forced out of your subtlety, and you are made gross and unintelligent, and all sorts of bad things have happened to you mentally and physically, purely and simply because of your accumulated negative karma over many, many lives. And so he also says you definitely reincarnate. And so one by one, these points of information are given to individuals, and those individuals need to process these ideas. And unfortunately, there are not very many people who understand it well and who understand it subtly. And I think that the purpose of our forum here, which we call Explorations of Gyan and Yoga, is exactly to do that, to really go into the depth of the knowledge so that we can have yoga on a higher level and not just approach it in a very simplistic way, which I think a lot of people do. You can learn ABC, but why do you learn ABC? Is so that you can read and write and look at more deep and subtle material, literary material, and that depends on the development of your mind. So God as the teacher is a very important relationship, because it's a relationship in which you're learning how to think, and you're learning how to be accountable for your thoughts, words, and actions, and you're learning that you cannot get away with anything. And you're also learning how to look at yourself from the same angle that God is looking at you. And then you're able to co-create yourself, which is a very interesting thing.
I'm wondering, where does the heart fit in all of this?
Yes, the heart.
Yeah,
the heart is your feelings. The heart is the most sensitive, deepest part of yourself, where you actually have contact with the being of God. The heart is your being. And so your heart is, in many cases, people's hearts are closed or frozen or wounded or dead, because your heart is also where your pain is, and your heart is where your love is. Your heart is where you're able to actually experience God. So your heart and your intelligence have to work together. But for many people, the heart has been in a way corrupted, in a way betrayed. So there is a process of opening the heart. And when you open your heart to God, there is the matter of trust. I think people who have a closed heart or a broken heart is because the individual has been betrayed and forsaken and disillusionment and all of these things. So the heart is connected with courage, the courage to bear yourself in front of God, the courage to not be concerned about public opinion and do just follow your heart and go where it leads. And, you know, the messages that you get from all around is you can't trust your heart. Your heart is the same thing as your imagination. You have to do what we tell you. And this goes back to the relationship with God, the teacher, who says those people don't know what they're talking about, whether it's to do with your intelligence or to do with your heart. Don't listen to those people, because they got you into trouble and they cause you to be disconnected with yourself. So I think that when a person opens their heart, and that makes it possible for them to be real and to be connected with the self. And when the heart is damaged and you open it, then it means there's a lot of healing involved. And so this is, again, part of the process. And God is also known as the great healer, because the damage to the heart means the damage to the soul. And so your heart and your soul is one and the same thing. And when I talk about intelligence and mind, I'm talking about faculties of the soul. And maybe you could say that the heart and the soul is one and the same thing. It's not that beating blood pump, but the heart of your being, the core of your being, the part that you will not let anyone touch, or in case they could corrupt it or damage it or break it. So it's the most sensitive, it's the most delicate, it's the most beautiful. And a lot of people, they have a lot of barbed wire around their heart, so no one can get in because they don't want to, they have to protect it, you see. But you don't have to protect your heart against God, because God dwells in your heart, or the right place for God is in your heart. And so therefore, you open it up, but then you have to be really sure, is this the one? So you may recognize and then say, well, you know, how do I develop this relationship in such a way that I let down all of my guard, let down all of my blocks? And he will say, this can be done as long as you give me exclusive place in your heart. And this is why sometimes in some religions they say God is jealous, because God will not share your heart with anyone else. And this is an interesting, that, you know, there are a lot of characteristics of God, personality traits of God that you discover along the way, because any relationship of this magnitude is something that's built over time. And so you want to have a lot of time so that you can have an incredible lifelong relationship with the one who is the highest of all souls, and the one that gives your life meaning, and the one who will love you, the one who will the one through whom you get fulfillment. You cannot get fulfillment from any other source. And so gradually you let go of all these other sources which you have been maybe holding on to for one reason or another, but they've failed you, you know. And so this is the heart.
Sister Denise, I see that there's some questions that have come through via Facebook Messenger, so I think we'll take them up now. Can you explain more the different levels of studying Raj Yoga? How to know we really are in a higher level and not an illusion?
Well, I think the most tangible aspect of our encounter with God is the written material which was written down from what incorporeal Shiv Baba spoke through the body of Brahma Baba. And we have the material of the last 5 years of these communications, because they're like ink on paper, they're tangible. The yoga is very subtle, very intangible, and you need to work with something tangible. And what he says is churn the murlis, really work with the murlis. And what I have tried to do is to show people how to work with the murlis, how to churn. And because this was the training I got through Daddy Janki, who was expert in this and directly taught by Shiv Baba and Brahma Baba, a great yogi. And so what we receive, we pass on to others. And so your certainty gets more and more consolidated as time goes by. And your level of Raj Yoga, I think this is very subjective, because it's not like you go to a school and you're in grade 1, grade 2, grade 3, etc. There's nothing like that here. You know, that there are all sorts of externally, visibly available courses and so on that you could look at, but the real stuff is your relationship with the Murli and your experimentation with yoga. And that is something that is not in any of these courses. All these courses are for getting people to come into the knowledge, but there aren't any that I have seen that really carry people forward very well. And of course, this is a missing element. And I mean, in a way, with this forum of explorations of Jnana and yoga, is really for that. It's really for people who want to carry their existing practice of Raj Yoga to a higher level. And but you ultimately will have to assess yourself, what your level is and what level you want to get to. And when you study the Murlis, you get many, especially in the Avyakt Murlis, you get many descriptions of the level that you need to be at. And then you compare where you are with where you have to be. And then you give a value for that. And then your work is to raise yourself up to the level that Baba is talking about.
The events from yesterday, accessing God's message through a trance messenger, plus offering of bog and flowers to Daddy Gulzar and the foundation souls. How does this figure in BK's connection with God? Does it not digress from a full and exclusive relationship with God?
You have to understand that this is in the context of the Indian society, the Indian culture, the Brahma Kumaris culture. It's up to you the extent to which you want to go into that. But it's also, I think, very reasonable to focus your attention on your personal spiritual development. And a lot of these type of things are very attractive to the Hindu devotees, but they may not be attractive to other Hindus who are not so involved in all the complexities of Hindu devotion, and also to people who may want to be away from all the religious paraphernalia and just cut to the core of just myself and God, and what's that? So you have to really decide how important that is for you.
In this time of extreme upheaval, what does God do? Will his role continue to be Father, Teacher, and Sadguru? Will he not directly intervene and make the suffering of souls be relieved? Or will they have to leave the body to find peace?
Well, what you're saying in this question is represents the religious view of what God is supposed to be doing. But he has his own sense of what he has to do. And so, okay, presumably you're referring to what's the big news at the moment, which is the war in Ukraine, and that people are starting to talk about tactical nuclear weapons, chemical weapons, the war spilling over into other parts of Europe, and people are talking about the Third World War. Now, all of these are things which Sheikh Baba has told since the beginning in 1936-37. He said, all this will happen. And he has said there is a predestined drama going on. And in the predestined drama, there are things which are very wonderful and things which are very horrible. And it is a drama that begins in a world called heaven and continues to develop, and more souls come onto the earth and start reincarnating, and gradually the world becomes hell. And when it becomes the end of the cycle, then it's full-on destruction. And this is what we're seeing. And so it's not his job to stop the drama and change it, or do all the things that the devotees try to get him to do. That's not his job. What he says is, I know the whole cycle. I know what happens, and I'm telling you in advance so that you can prepare yourself, because you're going to have to go through it. You're going to have to see it. And you are the ones who have to pull my energy into yourself so that you can send waves of light and peace and love and relieve the suffering of the people. This is the job of God's students. And he has said, I'm giving you all this information, not just for you, but because you have to use it, and you have to relieve the suffering of the people of the world yourselves. This is your job, our job. And he says, my job is to inform you. And I also will carry all the souls back to the world of light, the world of liberation. And that will be the last thing that happens in the predestined drama. And so what the religious people believe is that whatever is going on, God should fix it. And he says, no, it's going on because of human behavior. And it's going all the way to the logical conclusion. And one by one, he gets us to change how we do things, how we think, how we function, how we behave. And we then become the seeds, and we have to be an energy that gets the people of the world to do things which are not going to lead to their suffering, and stop doing things which do lead to their suffering, because all forms of human suffering are connected with their karma and connected with their lack of information about what's going on and about who God is and what they should be doing and how to handle these extreme situations. You know, before the war, then we had COVID, which is still going on, but which is not in the news. And so this is the nature of the final period of the drama. And then in addition to that, there's all sorts of natural calamities that we call climate change. And we're going to have to deal with the effects of climate change. And one of the effects of the war in Ukraine is food shortages. Another of the effects of climate change is food shortage and water shortage. And so the whole human race is going into a period of a lot of difficulty. And so what he says is, I come at this time because you need to have the strength to get through this, and you need the information, what you have to do, how you have to handle yourself in the face of all this. But I'm not going to change the drama, because the drama is fixed. Nothing I can do about it.
Thank you, Sister Denise. I think that your answer covered a very important question, because there's still a lot of confusion as to what God can and cannot do, and what is his responsibility to us and our responsibility to him and to the world. There is quite a bit of confusion on that. Somebody wants to know, why did you say that linear thinking is body conscious and circular thinking is soul conscious?
Why did I say it? Because it is. That's why I said it. But then what you probably want to know is what's the difference? And in a sense, linear thinking is that you assume that everything has a beginning and an end, and then whatever goes on between the beginning and the end is the information. Take, for example, the Big Bang Theory. And the Big Bang Theory is that some 14 billion years ago, there was a Big Bang, whereupon all the laws of physics suddenly came into being. And that was the beginning of everything. And then it carries on. And after another 14 billion years, there'll be another Big Bang and it'll all go away. And that's linear thinking, because it's not possible for a Big Bang to happen unless something caused it. And nothing can cause the beginning unless it was before the beginning, in which case it was already there, so it's not the beginning. So circular thinking is to understand that there is continuity, that there is perpetuity, that there is the energy of matter and spirit and the process of time, and these are all going on all the time. There is no beginning, there is no end. And it is a process of thinking that is presented by Shiv Baba in the way that he describes souls, the Supreme Soul, and the drama and the philosophy of karma, so that you can view the creation from the angle of the creator. And that is circular thinking. Because you see how everything fits, and that how you begin to understand and appreciate that you are eternal. And that's a very big thing for a person to do. And it's outside the range of most people's thinking. But if you keep working with the knowledge, you'll gradually enable your range to expand. And he also says that not all souls are able to do this. Some are able to do this, most are not, but he gives everyone the opportunity.
Someone wants you to expand on our relationship with God as the Satguru.
Satguru, in the way that he describes it, is the one who takes you to the world of liberation. That is the function of the Satguru. So the function of the Father is to give you an inheritance and raise you and prepare you for looking after the planet for the next 5,000 years. But the Satguru is the one who will that you have to come in front of. The full purification is done by the Satguru. That means you have to let go of all your impurities. You have to surrender. You have to expose yourself and allow the Satguru to make you completely pure. So no resistance, no blocks, no nothing. And the Satguru prepares you for your last death, and people are terrified of death. So the relationship with the Satguru is one in which you overcome your fear of death and you understand your immortality and your eternity. So that's a big one.
Someone wants to know, why is it that BKs continue to use the picture of Brahma Baba in front of the Gadis, especially when Baba says in the Murlis that Krishna is not the god of the Gita and Shiv Baba is. Why is Brahma Baba pictures continue to be used?
Because you need to know who Brahma Baba is, and you need to know who Krishna is. So what he says is Krishna is not God, but he's the highest of all human beings. And the soul of Krishna becomes Brahma. So not only are you being informed who God is, but you're also being informed who is the first created man, who is Adam. And people know who is Christ, who is Muhammad, who is Buddha, but they don't know who is Adam. They don't know who is Eve. They've heard about these characters and they don't know who the deities are. And so he's telling you about the creator, which is himself, and the creation, which is the people. And if you know clearly who is the first man, that is part of your education. And you also need to know that the information from Shiv Baba comes through the medium of Brahma Baba and not through any other source. And it is also said that at the time when God comes, there are many, many false gods, all sorts of people. Oh, God is speaking through me, God is speaking through me, I am the one, blah, blah, blah. And some of them look very attractive, but then eventually they will betray you. And so it's very, very difficult for an impure, ignorant, arrogant person to recognize God. And so this keeps this tangible image that this is the one through whom incorporeal God speaks, so that you have something tangible to hold on to, and it must be maintained, because otherwise people are just not clear enough, not stable enough, not steady enough to manage without that image. So it is very good, but it's not that BKs have decided to do it. It's that Shiv Baba lets you know that even I can use this image as an instrument through which to communicate with you. And there are many, many BKs who keep the picture of Brahma Baba because they are aware that Shiv Baba can use that two-dimensional image just as well as he can use a three-dimensional image. And of course, he was using the form of Dadi Gulzar for many years to speak the Avyakt Murlis. And that is because the incorporeal communicates to the human beings in their most impure form through a medium. And this is also remembered in different iconography of Hinduism. For example, in the Hindu temples of Shiva, you will see the oval form of the Shiva Lingam, which represents the incorporeal. And in that temple, you will also see a bull. And in Hinduism, it always shows that different deities are riding on some or another vehicle. And so the vehicle of Shiva is the bull, which means that he will communicate with you through the male. And then they have sacred cows, so that Brahma, the bull, is there. And then they also show a tortoise, which is the symbol of Dadi Gulzar, that he also communicates to you through one who is completely withdrawn. And Brahma Baba was a medium, but not a trance medium. Dadi Gulzar is a trance medium. So whenever Bab Dada is speaking through Dadi Gulzar, she is not listening. But whenever Shiv Baba was speaking through Brahma Baba, he was listening and also chipping in. It's different.
Sister Denise, every meditator has experienced that when they try to engage with God or do engage with God, they experience a lot of resistance. Okay. Mm-hmm. Sometimes the resistance is less and sometimes it's strong. So when we speaking about the identity of God, how does one work on the gravity that pulls you towards your body and your life here on earth?
Well, this is what he mentions of the weight of negative karma. It's in the way. It stops you from having contact with Shiv Baba. So you have to resist against it and you have to understand it. This is why first Gyan, then yoga. And always your churning of Gyan, when it's deep enough, when it's intense enough, when it's focused enough, it will take you to Shiv Baba. It will take you to meditation, but very few BKs get the point because they're always teaching this in a religious way, which is not very bright. But anyway, what can I do about that? I'm doing my best to get people to really understand that you cannot have good yoga with Shiv Baba without very intense churning, because it acts like a helicopter, which is a flying machine that takes you up through spinning rotary wings, and your spinning of the knowledge is actually an instrument that enables you to go beyond the pull of matter. And if you don't use it, then you're going to have a hard time. You just try jumping up and down, it's not going to work. You need the proper equipment. You need to use the yantras. Yantras are instruments. And the yantra is the system of churning the murli, which is also called spinning of the cycle. And hardly any BKs understand this level of gyan. And we need to move up a few levels to be able to use it properly and arrive at contact with Shiv Baba and handle the resistance.
Someone wants to know, why is it that the birth of 84 repeats identically? Why don't you learn anything through them for your next cycle? What is the point of the repetition?
Well, the thing is, you're not really in Gyan unless you understand this part. This is the barrier between being in Gyan and not being in Gyan. And if you want to be in Gyan, you have to work with this idea. Someone who says, what's the point? That means they're doing linear thinking. What he says is there are souls who take the full complement of 84 births, which means that they come on the earth at the beginning and they go through the whole cycle of the world, and that takes 5,000 years to complete 84 births, and that's the maximum possible. And all souls, however many births they have, it's all an identical repetition. It's not just the 84 that's an identical repetition. Even if you only have one birth, it's still an identical repetition every time. But for people to grasp this, you have to really churn the knowledge a lot for a long period of time. And so what I would suggest is that you just continue to listen to these forums of explorations of Gyan and Yoga. And I also do a lot of readings of the Murlis and Murli notes and many different things to try my best to make it easier for people to grasp this, because, you know, so many people think, okay, this is easy Raj Yoga, therefore doesn't require any effort. Well, it's not really easy Raj Yoga at all. Sahaj has other meanings besides the word easy. Sahaj means that you're studying this as a completely emptied out, corrupted soul who is arrogant and ignorant and limited and weighed down by negative karma. And you're studying this in the context of all kinds of karmic accounts which are coming up for settlement. And you have to bring yourself out of all of that. And you have to operate in all of that while studying this. Now, what's easy about that? Nothing. And it's very, very subtle. And so, you know, you have to just go a little bit ahead and gradually you can really grasp it, but it takes time. This is what I keep on saying. This is not something that you can learn in 5 minutes or even in 7 days. And the 7-day course means 7 days a week for the rest of your life. And that's going to go through many different stages. And it's called a pilgrimage. It's a long journey through many different terrains, and you go from whatever age you are when you start this until your death. So this is not particularly easy, but it is the most worthwhile thing to do. So maybe Easy Raj Yoga is Baba's advertising. Say, this is easy, you can do it, you know. And you say, okay. keep going, you know.
I think one of the things that people find most difficult is to keep the lines of communication with God open, even when everything around you is falling apart. Okay, on a daily basis, we all deal with our own fears, our insecurities, job, financial issues, health issues, relationship issues, and whether your life is good or not, we all have to deal with the Mahabharat war in our own minds, don't we? Okay, so as things are becoming more grave day by day, and in Baba's words, as Mother Nature is becoming more angry, how does one maintain a solid relationship with God and maintain one's equanimity in all of this?
Well, you know, this is really the most difficult of all possible things that anyone could undertake. And so it's equivalent to being, you know, the gold medalist in Olympic Games. And you have to be the gold medalist in every game because all of it is there. And the way you approach it, the way you do it, it's a constant effort and a constant learning. And you do a lot of things by trial and error. You become gradually more and more experienced. Your yoga becomes gradually more stable and steady. And you are under continuous assessment. That means you have test after test after test after test. And each test gets more difficult. And the higher you rise, the further you can fall, and the more difficult the tests will be. And so when you start this and you engage in this, you experience, oh yeah, I got this, it's very easy, it's very straightforward, let's go. And then gradually you begin to find the difficulties. And this is the case with any course of study. Whatever you decide to learn, whether it's mathematics or law or, you know, chemistry or needlework or whatever it happens to be, as you go further, it becomes more and more refined, more and more difficult, and you become more and more skilled. And there's less and less of you at that level. Lots of people start, not very many people finish, like in a marathon. And I just think a lot of people just haven't understood that this is the nature of this work.
Okay, I think we've come to the end of today's session. Is there any last words that you'd like to leave? What is God's personal message for his children at this time, year 2022? What is his direct and personal message? What does he want his children to know from his heart to theirs?
I think what he wants everyone to know is that he is always with you. And that you just need to be just need to make sure that you don't get too distracted by all the stuff that's going on, and you keep connected, because it's your call. It's not up to him to connect with you. It's up to you to connect with him. And he says, I'm with you, and just make yourself able to get through all of these things without reacting to them in the usual way, which is, oh God, why don't you do something to stop this? He said, don't do that. You already know better than that. You know that I'm with you, and you know that you have to get through this, and everybody has to get through this, but you have to get through it. And seeing you get through it, others will get the courage to get through it too. So you are the one who is being looked at, because they can't see God, but they can see you, and you are with God.
That's sweet. That's a lovely note on which to end today's session.